Negotiation. It's a fascinating topic. If you look on Amazon, there's over 30,000, almost 31,000 books on the subject. Clearly, in this short segment that's about 20 minutes long, we're not going to cover all of the theories and all of the techniques. We're not going to even scratch the surface. Instead, what you're going to find is a quick overview of the subject of negotiation. We'll talk about principled negotiation more so than the fixed-sum negotiation strategies that oftentimes you read about in business books. We'll go over several steps of a negotiation process and also give you a chance to practice negotiation skills at the very end with some ideas for how to put that into practice. I hope you enjoy this segment, and I'll see you at the other end. Welcome to Negotiation in Advocacy Practice. When we think about negotiation, we oftentimes have in our mind a zero-sum negotiation. This is the kind of negotiation that is sometimes called a fixed pie negotiation, in that if you get a slice of the pie, that means there's one less slice for me. So we're fighting over the same amount of material there. As an advocate, if you're in a zero-sum negotiation, it's going to be much more difficult to get the other side to give in or to make concessions, because when they give a concession to you, that's taking something away from them. Negotiation, one of the problems with it is that nobody ever gets exactly what they want, because it's assumed that you're going to trade off, well, this is important to you, so I'll concede on this, but you have to concede something important to me. We try to stay away from the idea of zero-sum negotiation, and I'll give you some ways of thinking about that as we go along. What we prefer to think about is principled negotiation. Principled negotiation has some different concepts and some ideas. It's a kind of a win-win situation so that there's not a zero-sum perception going on. The very first principle of principled negotiation is that you separate the people from the positions and from the problem. For example, we have a picture here of several people who could be involved in a negotiation. It looks like they're talking about something. What kind of perceptions do you get from looking at this picture? One guy is smiling, the other people look a little more skeptical. I'm not sure exactly what you see in it, but the thing is, in principled negotiation, you're supposed to try to ignore these perceptions that are personally based. You don't care about the nice-looking tie or the young man or the other three people over on the right-hand side. The important thing is that you're looking to solve a problem, and you're not trying to rely on your perceptions of the people involved. Similarly, there are emotions that get in the way of negotiation. Sometimes we look at somebody and we say, that guy reminds me of my brother-in-law who I can't stand, or I think that she is like this ex-girlfriend I had, and it's just, I can't stand being around her. You try purposely to remove your emotions from the negotiation, which is about solving a problem, not getting caught up in emotions. Try to distance yourself from your own emotions if you're going with a principled negotiation sort of approach. The final thing is communication. We all communicate, even when we're silent. And when we speak, the way that we speak, the speed that we speak at, our accent, all sorts of things get in the way. Body language can bother other people. The point here is that you're trying to do away with relying on the communication skills of the other person or even your own skills in order to reach a conclusion about the problem that you're negotiating over. Principled negotiation separates the person from the problem, your perceptions, emotions, and communication. Another aspect of principled negotiation is that you focus on your interests, not your positions. Your positions that you take during the negotiations are simply a way to fulfill your interests. They're not that important in and of themselves. So you have to remember that just because you say that you want something doesn't mean that that is that important. You can get stuck in defending your position and forget that you're losing your interest. That's the idea of maybe you win the battle, but you lose the war because you're losing focus on what's really important to you. Another principle of principled negotiation is that instead of thinking about having a zero-sum game or a fixed pie, you try to invent options for mutual gain. You come up with a better idea than what you initially had. When you're able to invent new options that allow everyone to win more than they initially had, then you've achieved a very good success in the principled negotiation approach. Finally, when you're dealing with your negotiations, you try to use objective criteria. You look at the problem through objective criteria, not how do you feel about it or what do you think about it. It's what the criteria are that you can actually see and measure. Similarly, when it comes to having a solution, you look for objective criteria to know whether you achieved that success or not. So these are the principles of principled negotiation. Now, most of the books that you're going to read in the library, or if you buy one through Amazon, wherever you get your books from, they're going to have steps. What are the steps of negotiating? Different books or different authors have different numbers of steps, but basically it's very similar. The first thing is that preparation is crucial. If you're going to have a successful negotiation, there's a number of things that you have to do, and it's going to take quite some time actually to be well prepared in a negotiation. Most people are not adequately trained that they can just go in and come up with a good result. In fact, the people who don't prepare are the ones who end up usually having the worst result. So the people who refuse to prepare are the ones who usually get the worst outcomes. As you prepare, you have to know what you want. What is the goal of the negotiation from your perspective? In principled negotiation, the whole idea is to solve problems. And so you have to be willing to see the problem from the other side, but at the same time, you have to know what your side is and what you want. You have to have an overview of the situation, and you have to know where you are within that context. This leads to the next step, which is you have to know your initial position. All right? You have to know where you want to go by the end of the negotiation, but in order to get there, you have to know where you're going to start off. You have to know your initial position. You don't have to believe that you're going to achieve your initial position, and in fact, there may be quite a distance between your ultimate goal that you expect to achieve and your initial position, but you have to have an initial position so that you can begin the negotiations. You also have to have fallback positions. Unless you have perfect knowledge of the other person's side, you don't know what they're going to come with. And in fact, if you're doing principled negotiation, there may emerge solutions out of the negotiation process that no one had thought of to begin with. You have to have fallback positions so that you can give ground in some areas in order to achieve that larger purpose. A fallback position is somewhere between your expected outcome, which is the goal that you set ahead of time, and your initial position. Most negotiators have several different fallback positions. Another thing that you have to prepare ahead of time is you have to know what you won't give up. Of all the different points of your negotiation strategy, one thing that's really important is to say, these issues are too important to give up on. We'll give up on this or that or the other thing, but not these. These are the most important ones. The place where you no longer will give up anything, that's called your limit. In many negotiations, you may be pushed to find out what your limit is. It's extremely helpful to know ahead of time when the other side is pushing too hard. And you can push back and say, look, if you keep insisting on that, we're not going to achieve anything. So you need to give up something in order for me to continue the negotiations. And this leads ultimately to you have to know when you'll walk away. Sometimes you can't get anything out of a negotiation. Sometimes the other party or parties are negotiating in bad faith. They're not really interested in solving a problem. You don't know why they're not moving. You don't know why things aren't working out in the negotiation. But you know that at some point you'll walk away because you've already thought about when that would be and what that would entail. In order to walk away from a negotiation, you have to firmly believe that there's no point in staying there. That's easier to decide ahead of time than it is in the midst of a negotiation process. As you're doing the negotiation, you need to use your education and persuasion skills. These are the things that we've talked about in the previous sections of this course. You've learned a lot, and those skills can be used during negotiations, particularly if you're taking on a principled negotiation approach and not a zero-sum approach. It's vital, if you're going to become a good negotiator, that you practice all the time. You could go into a thrift store and bargain there, negotiate there. You can go to work and you can begin to negotiate various aspects of things that maybe you just had never thought about negotiating before. It doesn't have to be your salary. It doesn't have to be other monetary benefits, but maybe it's time off. Maybe it's a more lenient sort of leave policy. Who knows? These are the things that if you're going to get good at negotiating, just like if you're going to get good at anything, you need to practice it. You need to study it. You need to take some time to get better at it. So we've been talking now in this course about advocacy. Advocacy is one type of policy practice, but it's the one that shows up most often in the NASW Code of Ethics, where it talks specifically about advocacy. In any 3-hour course, there's going to be things that are included, and there are going to be things that are not included. In terms of policy practice, both Miguel and I have done our best to include really core items. If you want more information, of course, there are plenty of books out there. We encourage you to do that. We also encourage you to link up with the sponsors of this course, that is the CSWE Learning Academy and Influencing Social Policy Group. This is Rick Hofer. I hope you found this material to be very helpful, and I hope that you put them into practice, because that, after all, is the whole point of policy practice, is to get something accomplished. We believe you have the tools now to do that. It's a matter of practice. It's a matter of self-confidence. It's a matter of getting together with other people and moving forward. The material on negotiation up to this point has been fairly theoretical, I think it's fair to say. But just like you can study music theory without being able to play any instrument, it's possible to study negotiation theory without actually being able to do any negotiation in real life. So I've added a few little things here at the end to help you actually practice your negotiation skills so that you can become a skillful practitioner of negotiation. You wouldn't think of trying to play the piano in public without practicing. So here we go with some practice for your negotiation skills. The very first thing that you have to do to become a good negotiator is to adopt a negotiation mindset. You have to be willing to open negotiations anytime, any place. Now, there are some locations and situations where it's expected that you're going to be a negotiator. An excellent place to start is to visit farmers markets where you're buying produce or fresh fruit. yard sales, estate sales, or other informal shopping situations. In these places, bargaining and negotiation are expected. If you take the price that they give you to start with, you're kind of considered naive and like, why aren't you playing along with the game here? Oftentimes, people at yard sales and estate sales really are doing it partly because they like the give and take of negotiation and bargaining. So join in. It does take a different mindset than we're used to in the United States. If you go to many countries outside of the US, it's considered normal to bargain. You would not take the first price that you're given. In the US, we say, oh, well, there's the price tag. That's how much I have to pay. Very often, you can negotiate a lower price. I know many times I've been able to get a lower price just by asking, hey, can I get a discount on this? This is even true with hospitals and healthcare bills. It's not so much that I can't afford the price that they're citing, but I know that they've built in a certain amount of bargaining room there. Sometimes all it takes to get 10% off of a hospital bill is to say, can you work with me on this? I've had the business people say, oh yes, because you ask, I'm authorized to provide a 10% discount. That's pretty easy money for a 4-word sentence. If you're going to try this, do it in something that's very low cost to you personally. Suppose it doesn't work out. Are you going to be embarrassed? Probably not. Probably you can just walk away without anything at all. For example, you go to a farmer's market and you see some delicious food and you're hungry. You want something to eat. An apple, a bag of oranges, something like that. Why not try to negotiate it? The first thing that you have to do is to go through the steps, which is how much is the least that you want to pay. So that's your goal. Let's just say the bag of oranges is $1. What happens if you were to say, well, I'd really like to have that bag of oranges for 50 cents. I wonder if it'll work. So then you say, well, what's your opening offer? Perhaps you say, well, I don't want to lowball it too much. I really want to pay 50 cents, but maybe I'll start off with 40 cents. I'm expecting them to reject that, and that's okay. Then what's the fallback position? Well, I really want it at 50 cents, but given that it costs $1, I could probably, without any danger at all, feel good about offering 75 cents or 80 cents. I mean, this is obviously kind of a silly example, except that it's practice, and you have to get into the mindset that it's okay to have this back and forth. It's not a reflection of you as a person. It's not a reflection of your ability to pay the full amount. It's something that you want to do for practice and maybe because it sounds a little bit like fun. And when will you walk away rather than pay what's being demanded? Maybe it's really not a problem for you to pay $1, and actually you'd gladly do that for that bag of oranges. But let's transfer this to a different situation. What happens if you're paying for a new car? Or even a used car? What happens if you're buying a house? This is when you want to be able to have this lower risk practice under your belt. You can go into department stores, you can go into furniture stores, big box stores of any type, and probably get away with not paying the full price. It's practice. Let's take this back to political advocacy. Let's recall an issue around poverty and inequality that you explored during the earlier videos on education and persuasion. Think about it from a negotiation standpoint now. In your mind, go through the steps. This is actually something that would be very helpful for you to do in a group and helping each other. Think about your goal, your initial position, your fallback positions, your limit, and when you would absolutely walk away. So what are the next steps after you go through this practice several times? In fact, I would suggest that you make that low-level, low-risk bargaining and negotiation on prices part of your everyday life. You can certainly save some money, you can have some fun, but basically you're training yourself to be a better negotiator. So once you've done that, what are your next steps? Well, you have to assess yourself. How good are you at these things? Where could you be better? Do you prefer education? Do you prefer persuasion? Do you really like the negotiation process? You have to think about this from your own perspective and try to get better. Where are you strong? Where do you need some additional help? So once you've assessed yourself, then you need to decide to improve your skills. Once you've made that decision, of course, it doesn't matter if you decide to improve your skills if you do nothing about it. So after you've decided to make your plan, you have to implement it. Where are you going to find the training that you need? Where are you going to practice your skills? Who are you going to get to help support you so that you can have a study group or so that you can have a practice group? All of these things will get better, quicker, more thoroughly if you work with other people on improving your skills. That's true of any skills, but certainly negotiation skills are part of that. I remember reading an advertisement for a negotiation training. It said, "You don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate." And this is true in political advocacy as well as other kinds of advocacy. Naturally, in political advocacy, you're going to want to bring along your group, your NASW colleagues, your CSWE colleagues, so that you can have more impact as a group. It may be that because you've gone through this training, you're going to be a leader of that group. You want to have the confidence that comes with practice, and you want to be able to deliver when the time comes. I hope you found this training on negotiation helpful. I want to see you put this into practice and make a difference for social justice. Well, that's it. You've come to the end of the certificate program. You've learned all about policy practice. You've learned about advocacy as a form of policy practice. You've learned a lot about education and persuasion and negotiation as methods for advocacy. Now it's time to go out and do your part. Now it's time to go and challenge the social injustices that we see around us. As social workers, it's our ethical duty to do this, and now that you have the information and the knowledge to do so, it's really your turn. Let's all work together to make this a better world.